I think the Atari 400, 800 were really the first home computers that I felt like were designed to be in somebody's home and for an average person to utilize.
Atari The entire reason that Atari created the Atari 2600 home console was to put their arcade hits into the home. If we can sell home versions of our arcade hit games into the home, we can sell millions of them instead of just take quarters from the thousands of people who go to arcades. And so the hardware was designed to make it possible to play Tank and Pong. That's about all that they did in the hardware.
So the distinction is this. CoinUp gets to use more expensive hardware. They get to use tons and tons of hardware, and they get to refresh their hardware all the time.
I had played an Outlaw-like game in the arcade, I think it was Midway, and you know, I was just told to make a game, so I said, well, here's an idea, two guys shooting at each other, and so I made that game. My goal is to try to make it like the arcade game, so I can look at the arcade game and say, this is what it has to do. So there really wasn't any need for me to have communication with the arcade guys. I'm particularly proud of the Atari 2600 Canyon Bomber because it also has the Atari arcade game Depth Charge in it. So it turns out that in a 2K byte Atari 2600 cartridge, I simulated both Canyon Bomber and Depth Charge, which were probably $3,000 arcade game hardware.
When I was young, when I was little, I remember there was this drugstore, and in their comic book rack, they had these abridged versions of great literature. You'd read it, and it was the whole story of Treasure Island. War and Peace, a comic book. But that whole notion of an abridged version, that is what was going to happen.
When I did Donkey Kong, I had, not surprisingly, absolutely no contact with Nintendo. Coleco was able to get me a machine. So I had a machine that I could play and look at, and I had already played the game. And like David said, with Canyon Bomber, the game is the spec. Frankly, the hardware is so different in its capabilities that I can't think of any value I would have had getting in touch with anybody at Nintendo. It's like talking to the guy who created the Porsche Carrera about making a bicycle. I mean, it's like, there's not a lot there. Not a lot you're gonna tell me. Here's this masterpiece and do it on this toaster, you know? And I was young enough and stupid enough to not be intimidated. And I wasn't, because I was just a kid. I was like, no big deal.
The 5200 was a tragedy. The 5200 was a good idea gone horribly wrong.
The big problem that we had at Atari, the thing that killed the industry more than any other one thing, even more possibly than the E.T. video game, is that it was the first product life cycle. No one had ever been through a major success video game console life cycle. So where does it end? Nowadays, when somebody comes out with a new system, they already are designing the next system because they know the life of a system. They know a console is good for a certain number of years, and then it's going to die, and it's going to fall off, and that's when we need to be ready and prepared to come in with the new system. Holy crap, you know, our first machine is finally falling off the cliff. We need something. We have something. We can take the 800, 400, 800 computer, repackage as the 5200, spit it out, and we can do it.
So the 5200 was basically what the 400, 800 was going to be 3 years before. It's a tough business. Business is cruel. And you know, like I say, I'll say it again, it was the first time anything was being done. No one knew.
And what happened was the Atari 5200, it grew very large because marketing wanted perceived value, so bigger was better in some respects. And then marketing got really focused on the Intellivision, and Intellivisions had a bunch of buttons. They had a keypad, and they had this disc with 12 distinct regions. And so, hey, if we put an analog stick here, and one that doesn't self-center was the great idea, this will be a better marketing message than the Intellivision controller. And of course, it was a horrible experience. The company lost focus on what was important, and it was gameplay's important. You know, good games sell, bad games don't. If you've got a bad control mechanism, doesn't matter how good the graphics are. It's not going to be fun to play.
Now what do you do? So, and that was the thing. Engineering we really wanted to do something cool, right? We wanted to do like a real next generation because the 400, 800 was already last generation.
The engineering team and the creative team, the game designers, we were so upset, and we all felt that we were making a wrong decision with this controller, that we put together a petition to upper management, and we just explained that, you know, this is a great product, the control is lacking, we've got some other alternatives we want you to see, and my name's number 3 on the list of the petitioners.
See, I wasn't someone who signed petitions so much as talked to people behind the scenes, because I always felt that was more like the way you operate in a corporation. And but I definitely put the word out whenever I could that, like, you know, this is something we either should have done a few years ago, or, you know, can't really do now.
We told marketing, hey, we could make this 2600 compatible. They didn't want anything to do with that. They said they must be very separate and distinct. We can't have backwards compatibility, which at the time we thought might be a great feature. It's a good way to get people that have these Atari games already and keep them on the Atari platform instead of giving them an opportunity to jump to another platform. And so we designed the product specifically so that you could never have 2600 compatibility. About 2 months before launch, they demanded 2600 compatibility. And at that time, we had to build an adapter. And then we actually had to modify consoles that were already made, the first ones, to work with this adapter. And we called this thing the piggyback parasite. We were just horribly embarrassed by that situation. That never should have happened.
There was some big time denial, you know, around Atari, because nobody wants their parade rained on. And when it's the best parade you've ever imagined in your life, nobody wants to see a cloud. You just don't want to see it. So we didn't.
So Adventure was a really popular product, and we were kind of, there was some vibe around maybe a sequel to Adventure. And somewhere in there, I got the idea of doing a series of games that were contests with comic books, with real prizes made by Franklin Mint. We were part of Warner Communications, and somewhere along there, we had started to be doing bits of comic books with the games. And because Warner Communications owned DC Comics. Warner Communications, I happen to know, I don't know that anyone else was paying attention, also owned Franklin Mint, right? Franklin Mint being a collectible company. I don't know, you know, they made plates and little figurines and stuff, I know, and medallions, and not my scene, but you know, it's a creative world. It's hard to talk about this without going me, me, me. I don't love going me, 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 but a lot of it was, I consider myself to basically have been the showrunner of Sword Quest. The concept was mine, the literary concept, the material. So the games are actually moderately literate and erudite, right? The whole story is put together as a lot like a Grail quest or something in Joseph Campbell. It would be a hero's journey, a spiritual evolution, a life. It's a story of a life, of a energetic, a magical life, right, through these mystical systems. So I embedded it in a lot of historical culture of mysticism, and sold the idea, and it went over big. You know, it was brave, it was ambitious, it was audacious, and it had a certain je ne sais quoi, but I don't know what it is. You know, I'll back up a little bit. There was kind of a bizarre effort to do a combination of Twitch and adventure game, to merge and to create an action adventure. I think Howard tried this in Raiders, right, where he tried to make an adventure game that was built into an action game and merge the two. So I consider Howard and I to be some of the pioneers of action adventure. Got to say this in a certain way. So you'd play this action game and maybe get a clue, a prize that you'd add to your inventory. And if you had that in your inventory, then you could unlock, then you'd be on this map. You wouldn't necessarily see the map, but you'd be inside a maze, and a door would open in the maze, and there'd be another action game there. And so it was kind of like a first-person adventure with action elements. That was basically, and you know, looking back at it when I say it that way and knowing what was in the times, it was very audacious. And it was actually very creative. It was really, you know, it was really cool.
When you have a tragedy, and I do believe that the fall of the video game industry in the early 80s was a tragedy. It was a tragedy to many, many people. It changed a lot of lives.
I think it's pretty obvious when it comes to the video game crash that Atari didn't have control over the quality.
I mean, it needed some sort of way to keep just anybody from writing cartridges for it.
And so many people saw this video game gold rush, and they just, you know, started dumping crap. I remember going into KB toy stores and just seeing, you know, really bad box art and just really just terrible looking games. And that's when I started losing interest, and the market became flooded just with garbage. And it ultimately led to, you know, of course, things like E.T. being, you know, actually buried in the desert like garbage.
And what happened was that E.T. became the face of the crash of the video game industry. And I, of course, was the butt behind the face. You know, that's kind of the way it went.
Greed and hubris, that's what undid Atari. If they just had worked more from a place of like focusing on the making great games and delivering great games to the customer instead of like, how can we maximize revenue? I feel like they'd still be a huge powerhouse today.
Frankly, Warner did not understand technology. He didn't understand the consumer marketplace, the video game, and Ray Kassar, you know, I think was afraid of releasing new product because it might not be as successful as VCS. So that's a sure way to fail. And
I regret that we didn't have a new console by '84 that would have made it so that Atari continued to be a really viable business.
we never, ever got down to ever having any process by which we could come up with a better system.
Even to say, I think people do believe that, like, if they had just released like the 5200 earlier, or if they released the 7800, or they had done different things, they would could never have, like, they would have survived the crash a lot better, and they would be like a powerhouse today, you know. Like, as a kid, I didn't know much about business, but I just felt like something was wrong.
No one knew anything. Certainly no one knew how to replace an existing console with a new one.
The real one-liner about why the game industry crashed and went away is that it was a first product life cycle and nobody knew what to do.